So everyone out there seems to be excited for the Galaxy S25, but not a lot of people are talking about the Galaxy A16. This is Samsung's recent new budget phone that they released in the US for $200. And you might wonder, for that type of price, if it's worth it. I'm gonna go over the compromises and the really good things about the phone, and we're gonna get into all of that in this full review. So let's get right into it and let's talk about the Samsung Galaxy A16 5G. So this phone is one of the most complicated phones to review because most people have different expectations whenever they go into a budget phone. I know there's a lot of people that have been trying out iPhones for a long time and they had a very good flagship iPhone, but their iPhone broke 3 or 4 years later. And then they try the very cheapest Android they could find and they get angry and frustrated. If you've had a flagship phone in the past, even 3 or 4 years ago, if you step down to the Galaxy A16, you might be a little bit disappointed. I've just got to be honest. But there's a large segment of people out there that do have budget phones on a daily basis. There's a lot of people that don't want to spend more than $200 on a phone to begin with. And if you're someone out there who's been in the budget segment for a long time, this phone might be pretty impressive to you for a lot of reasons. One of the reasons why this phone is so impressive is the software updates, because this is one of the first budget phones that's going to get this good of software support. We're talking 6 years of operating system updates, and that is a massive commitment from Samsung. This phone also has a very good display, an AMOLED display in a budget phone. It's still fairly similar to the A15. In fact, this phone overall isn't that much improved from the A15, which was a minor bump up from the A14, but still it's a very good display. The performance is good, I guess, for this type of price point in the US, and the camera does what you need it to do. It's got good battery life. It's going to be a good all-around phone for a normal budget user. And yeah, if you spend even $100 more, you will be very impressed with how much you could get for $300. And if you're someone on the prepaid market, you might find this phone for free. That's why I said this phone is so hard to review, because you might find it for free at a store, you might find it for $200 if you get the unlocked model, that is, and you might find it for $100 or even $50. I was so excited to get it. I walked into Best Buy, I bought the unlocked model. It does come with only 4 gigs of RAM, but despite all of these things, I still think this phone is going to be good for the budget user or for the person that finds it at a prepaid carrier for a cheap price. Because it is an all-around decent phone with good updates if your expectations are kept in check. And that's key. A lot of people are going to see this review and they're going to say, oh no, that's not for me. And you're right, if you find out that there are some compromises that you don't like, then yeah, this phone is not for you. But I'm really trying to make this review to let the people know who actually would buy it if it's worth it for them. And I'm trying to warn people at the same time who wouldn't even think about buying it to try to avoid it, because this phone does have a very unique audience, but it's actually pretty good for that audience. So when you look at the design, it's not flashy. There are big bezels on the top of the phone with a little bit of a teardrop thing here, and there are bezels on the bottom of the phone as well. I don't give a rip about bezels personally. They're not that big. It's just fine. Put a case on it. But if you really care about having a nice updated design, this is not going to be the place to go. When you look at the back of the phone, you're going to see that same type of distinct look with those 3 camera rings, and you're also going to see a design that feels a little bit like glass, but it's really just plastic on the back, plastic on the sides, and it's going to be just fine. You do have a fingerprint sensor on the right-hand side. That's also going to be your power button, and it's going to be a little bit slow to unlock, but honestly, it's still going to unlock pretty quick for your average person. I don't think that's a really big issue. You do have a USB-C port here on the bottom, but one of the big compromises this year that will absolutely devastate some people, you're not going to get a headphone jack. You do get an SD card slot, which is really, really nice, but you will not get a headphone jack. If you really care about that, you might just go with last year's A series lineup. There are some phones there that have a headphone jack, and maybe you could just go there and save a little bit of money, get an older phone. But a lot of people won't care about that in this day and age. Some people will, some won't. If you do care, look, I get it, it's not for you, and that's a little disappointing. But if you don't care, well, there's still some decent things to like here. Because when you look at the display, Samsung has always done a tremendous job at giving you a very good display for your money. Here we get a very nice 120 Hz display. It's a 2340 by 1080 resolution, and we do have a 6.7-inch screen here, so the screen size is a little bit bigger, I believe, compared to previous years, but either way, it does look very, very good. In high brightness mode, we're getting 800 nits of brightness. It's a Super AMOLED screen that does look very, very good for a budget phone. I would say it's good for entertainment, it's been good for scrolling around and all of those things. But the big hiccup that I found that a lot of people are just not going to be sure about, it's going to be performance. And like I said earlier, it really does all depend about expectations. Because there's a lot of people, even in the mid-range phone market, using an A35 even. Going down to this, it's going to feel a lot slower. And for me, I even had a little bit of a hiccup in my usage that made it even feel slower than it was. So when I first set up the phone, I actually restored this phone from a backup. For some reason, the phone was just acting a lot slower than I expected. I even did a Geekbench test, and whenever I did that test, I was getting a lower score than I expected from this processor. If you're in the US, this does come with an Exynos 1330 processor. In some other regions, you might get a Dimensity processor from MediaTek, but in my testing with this Exynos 1330, I was still expecting to get a better Geekbench score. I found out that I really just needed to factory reset it. But whenever I factory reset the phone, instead of restoring from a backup, I just logged in with my Gmail, and instead of having it download all of my apps and text messages, I just downloaded my apps one by one, because at least I had my contacts. My contacts are tied to my Gmail, my photos were backed up to my Google Photos, so I was able to try it again, and whenever I did, I found the performance was much better. I was now getting around 1800 or 1900 in Geekbench as far as the multi-core score, and everything did feel a lot smoother. Now still, as a high-end user that uses a lot of flagship phones and good mid-range phones, it did still feel a little bit slow to me, but it was still fine for your basic stuff. If you are trying to open up an app, of course it might take a second to open for the first time, or maybe 2 seconds, and occasionally you might have to deal with a little bit of gesture lag when you are swiping around. But I was able to go from app to app and open up 2, 3, or 4 apps and go back and forth and get some work done, and it didn't really feel too slow to me as a mid-range phone user who uses mid-range phones pretty often. So if you are someone out there that's coming from a previous phone like the Galaxy A15 or A14, or maybe you're coming from a really old phone like a Galaxy J7 or something, you're gonna find that this phone is gonna be a nice upgrade for you, and it might actually feel pretty speedy to those people. And it's still gonna be a little bit faster, I would say, than the A14 or A15, or it's gonna be around the same range as far as performance, and you should have a good experience. But if you come from a phone that's in the mid-range, maybe you paid $400 or $500 or $600, or you paid a really high price, maybe you had a flagship phone, then you probably won't enjoy the performance. It really is subjective. The bottom line is this is actually decent for the price point in the US, especially with all of the prepaid carrier deals, and I will say that it's still going to perform more than good enough for the basics. The big deal breaker for some people might be the RAM. It only comes with 4 gigabytes of RAM in the base model, and I know RAM is about multitasking, so if you try to do more than 3 or 4 things at once, if you swipe up on apps and you go from app to app to app, and you try to have 5 or 6 apps open at the same time, one of those apps might have to reload, and that might mean things seem a little bit slower to you. So it really does depend on who you are and what you do with your phone. It does have 128 gigs of storage, so it'll have more than enough storage. It does have an SD card slot. So I think for someone just looking for a really nice phone that looks good with the display, that just performs okay, you're still going to enjoy this. And not only that, but you're also going to get a decent experience as far as the camera. Now, no, you don't get 4K, you only get 1080p, and you also have a little bit of shutter lag. But if you're wanting to take some basic pictures of your kids, the pictures are going to turn out okay. Now, it's not going to be as good as the Google Pixel 6a, for example, but you are going to get a better refresh rate here, and you are going to also get not only a really nice screen, but you're going to get some extra features like an SD card slot, and this phone has massive updates, which is a really big deal. So if you have kids that move around all of the time and they're moving really, really fast, yeah, you might have some pictures that look a little bit off. You might have to tell them to hold still. And if you're trying to take amazing 4K video, this is not the place to do it. You're not gonna find that great of a deal. If you're wanting the best performing phone around $200, you might find a little bit of a better deal with OnePlus and their Nord series. They have really good hardware for the money. But this phone has really good battery life with a 5,000 milliamp battery. The phone lasts for a really long time. You'll definitely get through your day with this phone, no problem. It's going to have very good software updates, and it's gonna be very good for the basics with a very good screen. That's what this phone does provide you. So it's gonna be more than enough for a lot of people, and a lot of people who hate on budget phones and say all of these bad things about budget phones, those people are talking a bunch of foolishness. Some people don't mind getting a phone like this. And if it gets a little bit slow in 2 or 3 years, you could always do a factory reset. But believe it or not, there are some people that are going to enjoy this phone, and it's gonna be more than enough for them. It actually can open up things pretty fast. It just might take an extra half second to do it. And for us people that are on our flagship phones, our mid-range phones, and we're always scrolling through so fast, we might say that budget phones shouldn't even exist. And some people make that case. But the truth is, a lot of those people are really recommending that people buy phones with 3-year-old batteries or older phones with no warranty, right? How is that gonna be for your older grandpa who really needs his phone to work and he doesn't even have a warranty because he bought a phone with a 3-year-old battery, so his phone dies like every 20 minutes? That's just a terrible experience. So some people don't mind waiting a little bit for the power, but they do want a phone with good battery life, they want a phone with a good screen, and they might want a phone that's gonna be supported with good updates. And honestly, if you look at the budget scene right now, there are not a lot of phones that are supported like this phone. Most phones, like Motorola phones, they'll get one update, but that's it. I understand in other countries, you probably get a lot better of a deal, and maybe you'll get a faster phone for this price. But to get the software support here, to get a really nice display, I still think the A16 is pretty great. And for that reason, we should celebrate, because this phone, it's actually not that bad. It's actually pretty decent for the money. And it's way better than budget phones were years ago. So that's why I celebrate it. And I think a lot of us should celebrate it too, because budget phones are actually getting pretty good for a little bit less money. So hopefully this review has helped you out. If you like it, please give me a like. And if you love it, hey, give me a sub. That means a lot. You could also check the links in the description, because yeah, this phone does retail for $200, but it might go on sale a lot, and you're gonna see this phone drop in price. But not only that, there's a lot of other prepaid carriers that are gonna have it for free or cheaper. So check out some links below. I really hope you have a great day, and no matter who you are or what phone you have, feel free to check out some other content, and I just hope you have a tremendous day and a very, very tremendous week.